For showing up, everybody. Today we're primarily going to talk about growth and the economic trends in Northwest Arkansas. And so to that end, we've invited three speakers who have different perspectives on that. I think it's going to be a pretty good conversation. It's kind of numbers driven. The previous seminars have been more, kind of fuzzy stuff relatively to what we're talking about today. So hopefully the fact that we're doing this while we're eating, we can still stay awake, but it is pretty interesting stuff. There's one, I'm sorry, I'm sure Mervin always finds a way to make it interesting.
Not with burritos.
But there's not with burritos. But there's this old joke, well, I don't know, it's a business saying, one of these things that I think is kind of, never sat well with me, but remember that period of time where you would say that you would never use the word problem? It was like a forbidden word. You'd say, we have a problem, and people would say, we have an opportunity instead. Yeah. Well, most problems are not opportunities, they're freaking problems. And it's like, know the fact that the plane crash is not an opportunity, it's an actual problem. But when it comes to growth, that is an appropriate thing to say. We have a problem. And it's the growth that is coming our way, and it's a freight train coming down the tracks, and it's coming whether we acknowledge it and deal with it or not. It's also a tremendous opportunity, and it's an opportunity for Rogers to either step up and compete with the other cities in Northwest Arkansas and to manage this growth effectively and to emerge stronger because we've been proactive about it and thoughtful. And we're looking at the data and the opportunity optimistically and in a way that benefits the citizens of our town, or it's a problem because we have failed to plan for it adequately and we've got our heads in the sand. And so this could have been the first seminar that we had in the series, and maybe it should have been, but because of scheduling issues, we weren't able to frame it that way. But this is kind of the beginning of the conversation, is to look at what the growth looks like, because it is, after all, a comprehensive strategy that at the end of this conversation we're going to be getting to. I did want to say a few words. We had a conversation at the end of City Council this week with Mandy, brought this up. And I just want to frame the overall thing here. Right now, this is classroom stuff. We're not really debating or anything like that, and I want to acknowledge that. We will get to the point where we sit down and we hash it out. But before we can get to the point where the debate occurs, we felt that it was important to go through the information, to look at the magnitude of the growth estimates, the assumptions that go into those growth estimates, how realistic they are, and all that stuff. And then to look at what are some sort of leading edge alternatives to the types of multifamily development that have caused backlash against multifamily. It's not that we're anti-multifamily, it's that we're anti-some multifamily because it's not very good multifamily. And how does arts and culture play a role in managing growth? And we're going to get into stormwater concerns and other things. All of these things go into the growth strategy, and all of these things were thought about and cooked into the comprehensive growth map. And so if we're going to dive into a conversation about maximum density rates or something like that without having gone through the prerequisite knowledge to even get to that point, then we're just kind of arguing over things that we don't fully comprehend. And so I just want to be real clear that this is more of a classroom phase, but once we get through the knowledge, then we'll get to the conversation and go into a smoke-filled room and throw rocks at each other and arrive at a synthesis of ideas that hopefully everybody agrees with and that we've got somewhat of a consensus around. Any questions about that or comments from anybody? But I do hope, that doesn't mean I'm not hoping to have a lively conversation on this. And then the other thing I'll acknowledge is, this is a curated list of topics. And if we're missing something, let me know. But for example, there was interest in bringing the Realtors Association into this to talk about single-family housing. Well, my assumption is that single-family housing is never the least bit controversial, and so establishing the idea that we're planning for single-family housing, that's probably not going to create a big debate. But if we start talking about missing middle housing or multifamily housing, or even, at the last seminar, it was mentioned mobile home courts, things like that are very controversial. And so we're trying to focus on the things that will be more controversial about this conversation. If somebody really wants, if you feel like we've missed a topic that needs to be covered or something like that, let us know, and we can, certainly either explain why we don't think that's worth the time, or we can, didn't think about that, and try to get that on the docket. Anything from you, Mayor? Okay. Does that all make sense? All righty. I'll introduce the speakers today. Mervyn Jabaraj is the director of the Center of Business and Economic Research at the Sam Walton College of Business at the University of Arkansas. He earned a bachelor's degree in economics and international relations and a master's of public administration and public policy from the U of A. He was previously the assistant director at the center, where he has worked since 2007. And if you've been to any of the, sort of the local business development luncheons and things like that, Mervyn is always one of the most interesting speakers, and probably has as good a handle as anybody in Northwest Arkansas on the growth numbers, the state of business, how we compare to other similar cities, and so he brings a wealth of knowledge to the conversation. Next is Paul Gatling. Paul is the editor of the Northwest Arkansas Business Journal, and he's lived in Bentonville since 2001, and has worked for the Northwest Arkansas Business Journal since February of 2011. The journal publishes twice a week and also reports business and political news daily at northwestarkansasbusinessjournal.com. He has a radio segment for the region's NPR affiliate and develops community relationships between local businesses, nonprofits, and other stakeholders. If you haven't heard the NPR bit, it's really interesting. I think it's an opportunity to kind of just discuss whatever you want to talk about, and you get a lot of really insightful kind of gossipy stuff a little bit, and just really interesting.
It is on Sunday mornings, though, so not too bad.
Paul said before we started that he will provide more of the what is he hearing out on the street kind of stuff and perspective, a little bit less numbers driven than our other guests. Mike Harvey is with the Northwest Arkansas Council. He works with educators and business people to strengthen the region's workforce. He partners with area companies to recruit talent as part of the council's Finding NWA program. In close collaboration with the Chambers of Commerce on the Employer Retention and Expansion Program, he oversees the council's relationship with site selectors who assist companies in evaluating Northwest Arkansas as a place to do business. On the team since 2011, he lives in Washington County with his wife and doggo. So one of the main things that is sort of driving all the way back to the Downtown Rogers Master Plan is this idea of attracting and retaining key talent into Northwest Arkansas. It's one of the strategic main goals in the area, and it's certainly an emphasis item for the Northwest Arkansas Council. And so that's a very timely topic and has a lot to do with a lot of the things that we're doing. Also, and I understand we'll get to this a little bit, but Northwest Arkansas seems to be gaining more and more traction with companies other than the big ones who are already here, looking to locate general headquarters or major regional offices. So maybe we'll get a little bit of insight into that. So with that, gentlemen, I'd like to kick it off with you, Mervyn, if you could just talk a little bit about the numbers that you're seeing in Northwest Arkansas and your perspective on growth.
I think I was probably been doing these type of dog and pony shows in the past several weeks. There's a lot of money coming in from the federal government. It's like, what do we do with this money? And, one of the things that always comes up is, obviously this region is growing. Last year, notwithstanding We did lose some jobs last year, but nonetheless, we lost jobs in very specific sectors, and the sectors that always grow in Northwest Arkansas continued to grow even last year. So compared to the rest of the state, I think Northwest Arkansas lost annually maybe about 3,000 jobs, which there were a lot more than 3,000 jobs lost in leisure and hospitality and healthcare and government services and places like laundromats and hair salons and nail salons, but we added so many more jobs in professional business services and trade, transportation, utilities that it makes the overall number look smaller. So last year was also even though it's the population estimate, not the actual census hard count, was actually faster growth last year than in previous years in Northwest Arkansas. The population grew by around 2.5%. So all that is to say that obviously this region is growing, but with that growth comes challenges, opportunities, whatever you want to call it, and one of the biggest ones we have is housing affordability. So Northwest Arkansas was ranked number 4 best place to live. We displaced Denver and Austin and all of these wonderful places, not because our unemployment rate is low, their unemployment rate is low, they have jobs, we have jobs, but the reason we displaced them is that their cost of living started going up and ours is going up, but not as fast as theirs. So, so our home prices here are competitive with the major metropolitan areas around us. So Tulsa, more expensive than Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, St. Louis. We're on par in many instances with Dallas-Fort Worth. Austin's still more expensive than us. So when you think about all the people that come to Northwest Arkansas, the majority of them come from other parts of Arkansas or Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And these are places that our homes are now more expensive than. And that's the challenge I think we need to address in this region before it becomes intractable like it's in the Bay Area or to some extent even in Austin. So current home prices in Rogers, the average home price is $376,000 and the median's about $276,000. If you want to look at a very crude measure of affordability, the median household income in Rogers is about $67,000, which is one of the highest in the state. So the median home is nearly 4 times the median household income, and you want that number to be around 2.5. So we have all of our cities in Northwest Arkansas have a median multiple which is very similar, north of 4. So we want to try to address that gap in housing affordability, and I'll stop talking for now.
Housing affordability and housing availability as well. The inventory is, we reached about 500, I think, a couple of months ago from a realtor I talked to just this week, and it's cut back up in the 700 range just the last couple of months. But I've also heard from a pretty reliable source, but I've not independently verified this from the company, that D.R. Horton, largest home builder in the country, one of the biggest companies in the world, is about to start building homes in Northwest Arkansas. Primarily, I think, Pea Ridge and Siloam Springs, where there's land to buy. They're a large tract home builder, 400 to 500 homes at a time. They have an affordable division, they've got a high-end division, they've got several different homes, but that kind of speaks to, my question was, how come they haven't been building homes here to begin with? Because obviously this is a Northwest Arkansas region that's growing, but they're kind of like Bank of America. They don't really need to be here until it can move the needle a little bit for them. And I think clearly there's money to be made in building houses in Northwest Arkansas. So that's one thing I think that's about to happen to address maybe the inventory level. But you mentioned something about the multifamily and the pushback that you get for some of the NIMBYs who don't want to see the high-end multifamily that they're building in this market. That kind of prices out a lot of the people that's meant for. Those multifamily rates are $1,500, $1,600 a month, and when it's more for, you need the $800, $900, maybe $1,000 a month. But those are the ones you get the pushback against. So, got to be a happy working environment between both sides there, between the developer and the city.
One of the challenges we see with that is where we have virtually unlimited density allowances for multifamily is along the I-49 region and in downtown Rogers. But the land cost is so high in those places that the only way to make the pro forma work for a developer is to do high-end, multifamily or extremely large, projects that we probably don't warrant yet. And then we've got other neighborhood centers scattered throughout the city where we have a confluence of existing infrastructure to support lower end, more affordable multifamily. When we talk about affordability, it's just a given that unaffordable housing is a bad thing. Why is that? I mean, why do we really care? If it's unaffordable to live in Northwest Arkansas, doesn't the market eventually just react to that and it'll work its way out? Who cares if it's, so houses are expensive.
Well, I've kind of thought that it's, who's it unaffordable for? I mean, it just takes one buyer for one house, and clearly Northwest Arkansas is attractive enough as a market it's attracting those buyers for those properties. I mean, the home sales this year through June are about the same as they were last year, but the prices are 20% up. So somebody's buying the houses. Now, it may not be affordable for everybody to move here, but it's affordable for enough people that are moving here. I mean, the influx of people is not stopping. So those are the homes that builders are building. Back to the D.R. Horton thing, I think it's good if you get a large tract affordable home builder. Somebody's got to jump off the cliff and start building those homes. I mean, I know the prices we hear so much about this year, the lumber prices and steel prices and all the prices, and hopefully those are maybe by the end of the year will moderate back to a more regular level. But the expensive homes, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 homes, there's not a whole lot of those in the inventory, and it just takes one buyer. I mean, it's not appealing for everyone, it's just appealing for one.
What impact does it have overall on the economy when we don't have housing stock to support lower income people?
We had this issue where I came from here 10 years ago.
I can't hear you back here.
All of us or just me?
All of you.
We if you could move up, we don't have a microphone or anything, and I'm projecting about as much as I can. But
I'll project more. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right.
Use your basketball, not
Yeah.
golf.
Yeah. What I was saying, we had this issue in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I came here from 10 years ago. And what happens there is, and it didn't happen slowly in Charlottesville, the median price when I left there was, it was $200 and something a square foot 10 years ago. And in essence, what was going on there, and this was a very anti-growth community, prided themselves on being very liberal and green and all these things, and their land use policies basically were forcing people further and further out of Charlottesville, even though they were working in Charlottesville. So it was like squeezing a water balloon is what they were doing, right? You're pushing people out to the rural areas where the services are more, you have to put in infrastructure. Those services cost somebody something. Those people have to get in cars and drive to their jobs. It just puts more people on the road. So it really kind of backfires when you don't have a healthy mix of housing available to the population. They got to live somewhere, and so if they're working here, they're going to be having to commute in, and so I think and the council is we're opening this new front now with this housing affordability division like we did with healthcare. We're going to be hiring somebody to come in here and really kind of do things like look at policies kind of across the board and what we can do to increase that stock of affordable housing. I think it's a challenge because people are moving here. I think I got the numbers from you recently, but we had like 12,000 more people last year, and like Mervyn said, that was more than the previous 2 years pre-pandemic. And that also was with the screws tightened on immigration. Our international numbers have dropped really dramatically during the Trump administration, and I'm sure Biden's going to reverse a lot of that, and so I'm not sure what that's going to do. Also, what I've noticed is, and you may have noticed this, but unemployment and in employment, there are two different surveys, and the job growth is kind of lagging on the employer survey, but on the population survey, our job growth has been pretty robust, and there's been this big kind of divergence of people and jobs on one of those surveys. And so I don't know what's going on there. It wasn't like that 2 years ago. It could be that we've had a big influx of people working remote. And I think that's one thing you have to be aware of, that we're a very attractive place for remote workers, I think, if you're just looking at quality of life and if you have broadband access and those sort of things. And I think that's something we should be aware of. Obviously, they probably aren't in that affordable housing cohort. These folks that are coming are making pretty good money, but yeah, just
That's
said a lot
probably
of things
driving
there.
the population boom of last year, right? I mean, the remote worker who, I can do this job from anywhere now that I've figured that out. I'm going to go move to this area that I've heard and read so much about.
I don't know where they came from, but
Anecdotally,
Yeah.
I see these people,
Yeah.
but I can't make the numbers match with the divergence between the payroll survey
like-
and the employment survey. So
it's like 10,000 more.
yeah, and for the state
Off
too,
the
that's like
books,
right.
60,000 more for the
Weird.
Some of that's
Yeah,
a measurement
it's
error.
So
I think,
weird.
but-
Going on.
We're hearing about this flight from the coasts, but we don't really have any good, reliable data to support that they're coming here.
Well, I think that flight goes both ways. I think last year they were flying from the coast. This year they're going back.
Now they're going back. Well,
That-
right now
that
COVID's
data-
so high in Arkansas, they're probably.
That data lags.
Yeah.
That data lags a year or two, and so we don't really have a good handle on it. The moving companies keep track of that stuff, but it's not as good as the IRS data. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quick question, how do you see natural disasters affecting migration just from the coast inwards?
So
Are there any data supporting stuff?
I mean, theoretically, I guess people could be leaving California for the wildfires.
Like the fires
but
and stuff,
they're-
you mean? Like
yeah.
fires?
Hurricanes?
Oh yeah.
People aren't leaving Florida fast enough.
They're moving down to Florida and Texas still, so
Yeah.
not seeing anything like that. Yeah.
I think people still move for jobs
They
to
do.
Northwest Arkansas. This is
Yeah.
not a retirement community. It's not a.
It is. We're a working age cohort. We had that, and I guess we'll talk about this, that Life Works Here campaign that we did, right? We announced an incentive really focusing on trying to get more STEM focused talent and creatives and entrepreneurs into the area. It was a very small program. It was like 100 slots. We got 30,000 applications.
And this is the $10,000 in a mountain bike program?
Yeah. 30,000 applications.
From where? All over the country.
150 countries, every state in the U.S. It was overwhelming. We didn't know what. We were like the dog that caught the car. I mean, it was really, it shocked us that the response was that overwhelming. And so there's an interest in these, I think, mid-sized cities that offer opportunity, affordability, and quality of life. I really do. I just think this is very timely because they're going to keep coming.
Well, so just to boil it down, because we hear that phrase so much, quality of life, and it could mean a different thing to everybody different in this room. What do you think quality of life is? Is there a quality of life in Northwest Arkansas, or is there a quality of life in Rogers that's different from Fayetteville or Rogers? I mean, what is the quality of life that we're talking about here, that we're using, or that people are seeing quality of life and coming to Northwest Arkansas and moving to Rogers, for example?
Are you asking me?
Just
I'd ask
general-
you. I'd probably ask you that question.
Well, I mean,
But I'm-
in Bentonville, I mean, it's pretty defined as, right now, they've defined themselves as mountain biking and cycling.
Here too,
Self-anointed.
Yeah.
It turns out.
Right.
Council passed a resolution declaring that the mountain biking capital of the world, and so it is.
Done.
That's right. Yeah.
You got to
We
figure
won't-
something out.
Yeah, we
World
won't get
capital.
into
Yeah.
We won't get into who called them that, but they call themselves the mountain biking capital of the world, and so they're developing trails every day and developing parks, and so that's quality of life, being able to, have this active lifestyle there. So, what's the quality of life and focus or goal at the Fayetteville Convention Visitors Bureau. What is it here in Rogers? What is it in Springdale or Siloam Springs? Or is it all, are we all jumping on the site? I don't know.
In our internal research, a couple of things that continue to pop up, talking to Rogers residents, and this is, it's kind of myopic, but kind of the self-image is that there's a certain authenticity grounded in history about Rogers that and this is sort of a reaction to Bentonville being built the way that it has, that we have built in smaller, more incremental steps without losing kind of our original mojo, and that we're also sort of a gateway to the Ozarks. So we're a little bit, at least, I don't know, from a perception perspective, we're a little bit more connected to the Ozark Mountains and the region, so a little bit more of an outdoorsy feel in Rogers. But I mean, that's internal. I'd be interested in more of a objective external perspective on that.
I mean, I think. Oh, there was a. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, Mandy had a.
Keep going, because it's a totally different topic. Come back to me when you're done with this.
I also think that perspectives have changed. I don't think people travel between the cities as much as they used to, and people getting in the car. Partly speaking for myself too, but like people getting in the car and going from Fayetteville to Bentonville just to do one thing in the evening, whether that's to eat in a restaurant or drink. It's just not something people do. So you kind of have to develop your own sort of niche of people and activities, and largely when people are not working, which for work they do travel between communities, they don't want to make the same trip again on the weekends or in the evening with their families to do the same things, because it's just, I know this commute's nothing compared to other
Yeah.
places, but in people's minds it's too long, and that's what counts. And so people don't go eat at a restaurant. Don't travel from Fayetteville to Bentonville to go eat and drink at a restaurant. People don't travel from Bentonville to Fayetteville or Rogers. If they do, it's a big production or they're doing it because there's some event in downtown Bentonville or downtown Fayetteville or Rogers that they're coming to, but it's not a daily activity.
We had, look, I don't know that the whole, from 30,000, feet, the quality of life has only improved in Northwest Arkansas. It's in the 10 years I've been here, it's been amazing, the changes and everything. But Northwest Arkansas has always been a great place to raise families, and our target has always been that mid-career professional. Let's be honest. And I think what has changed in the past 10 years is his generation has gotten older and started forming families, and this place has gotten a lot more attractive to a much bigger generation now than ours. And so that is something that I think everybody needs to pay attention to, is that the millennials, my wife is one, and she's turning 40 this year, so they're not young bucks anymore, but he is. He's at the very end. But he and I have the Millennial X thing going. So I think that's definitely millennials. The millennials do, I think, value more quality of life amenities than Gen X. I think we were more focused on the opportunity, and the place didn't matter as much. But to millennials, their priorities are different, better in my opinion than Gen X. And Northwest Arkansas, I think, just has a lot to offer if you're starting a family, right? It's got good schools, got low crime rates, got all this new great arts and culture and outdoor recreational amenities. We don't have pro sports and some of those other things, but that's close enough if you need that. You've got affordability here, and let's be honest, that's probably the number one thing when it gets down to it now for people that are in that household formation is affordability. So it kind of gets back to housing being the number one component of affordability.
Housing plus transportation costs, and this also gets to, it's great that D.R. Horton is building houses in Pea Ridge and Siloam, but there aren't that many jobs in Pea Ridge or Siloam.
Right. Well,
so
it's going to take people getting used to the fact that they're going to have to live away from the interstate and live away, out in east or west of the county, I think, to make home prices maybe go down a little bit here in Bentonville, Rogers, Springdale, and Fayetteville. You're going to have to, live east or west. It's not that far. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but that's like asking people. People are eventually going to have to get used to public transportation too, and that's not, probably not going so well. But I would also add to your point about what this area is desirable for. Used to be desirable for retail and logistics and business professionals. Now it's desirable for people who are immersed in the outdoor recreation lifestyle and the artist and creative lifestyle. And then I think coming up on the horizon, the medical tourism lifestyle, the healthcare tourism lifestyle, if you will. Really, with the UAMS things going on and the Mercy, such a huge presence here and only getting bigger, and whole health and just all the stuff that's coming together. Northwest Arkansas, I think, is really positioned to be a healthcare hub and attracting people not just to work, but to, a sports analogy. If you have an elbow problem right now, everybody in the world goes to Birmingham, Alabama. That's the place to go for the surgeon and the people and the ecosystem they've built down there. With the orthopedic piece that UAMS already has and is going to add to with their big new office building, you might have world-class athletes to come here for treatment, come here for training, come here for all kinds of things. I think healthcare is maybe the next big thing that's going to pop up.
How are y'all tracking with the Wellness Institute and what kind of an impact that might have?
I think it's going to be transformational. I really do. And I don't know, maybe I'm, I had my own epiphany a few years ago, obviously with a health issue, and really kind of changed my whole lifestyle because of it. I'm a huge believer in holistic, diet, exercise, stress relief, and a wellness as a savior of our broken, healthcare system. It's really interesting to look at hard statistics, and when people compare us to other parts of the world and their healthcare systems and our outcomes, right? And they go right to life expectancy. There's one variable that affects our life expectancy above all others, and it's obesity in this country. And if we were able to get our arms around obesity, our life expectancy would be as good or better than everybody else in the developed world. And I think their approach at whole health and training doctors to focus on those things instead of just giving you a pill or cutting you open, not to get to that point is kind of the purpose of that. And I think if we can be the center of that, I think it would be transformational for this.
So the council was championing the Blue Zones initiative,
yeah,
and then the Whole Health Institute. I think what happened is the Whole Health Institute kind of emerged on the horizon, and we that's a really big deal. How do we, as a region, how does Rogers incorporate kind of this approach to wellness and health that the Whole Health Institute represents? Because there's not as clear a path as there was with Blue Zones to kind of adopt a program.
Yeah, that one costs a lot of money too.
A lot of money.
And
kind of unrealistic in a lot of ways.
But no, I think having a Whole Health Institute, one of the things that I think they will do is probably get into schools and have educational programs and reach out into communities and kind of teach people how to live healthier, cook healthier, and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably how they're going to approach it. You would be much better off talking to our healthcare transformation guy, Ryan Cork. He's all plugged into this. He's the guy with the great hair and beard and
terrific hair.
He's got great hair. Yeah, and I think he's got his tailor on retainer, a personal tailor, because he just dresses to the nines.
I'm impressed with Mervin's
he
hair.
Literally dresses as better than Mervin, which is like way up. So I mean that's what I think.
Right.
I really do think.
Mandy, we're going off the rails.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm writing all my questions down because I have a lot of them. One of the things I'd like to hear from you all, if you have an understanding today of what the gig workforce is like here in Northwest Arkansas, any idea how big it is, how it's going, and anything we should anticipate happening in the future for that segment.
I don't know
I
that
don't.
we have that many gig workers here. I think most of the people that are working in the gig economy maybe have another job and are kind of doing some of those things part-time. I don't know that we necessarily have full-time gig workers that do a series of gigs. I mean, I'm sure we do, but just not as many as some of the other
Not enough to
regions.
pop up on your
No.
radar as a data
It's
source.
kind of hard to track. There's probably some data in the.
It's also
DLS,
pretty hard to get an
yeah.
Uber in a hurry, so, you know. there
But
aren't
they
that
would be
many
like,
of them.
they'd be classified, I guess, as sole proprietors in that. But there's extended proprietors, like people that do things on the side, like he was saying. And so, who they are and what they do is getting me a challenge. But this is why this whole dual surveys that I'm talking about, this is really getting down the nerd weeds here. That's what's got me perplexed when you have this kind of difference between the two surveys of 5,000 2 years ago, maybe even less. Now it's 15,000. It's like, well, what are all these people doing? They're showing employed here, but they don't show up here. So, are they gig workers? Are they remote workers? I don't know, but
I think the survey data.
They may not know.
It
They
could
just
be.
know they want to
Could
live
be.
in Northwest Arkansas right now, and then
Yeah.
we'll worry about Plan B later.
I guess
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, I have another one, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I work in human resources at Walmart, so I hear a lot about people moving here and relocating and things. One of the things we hear a lot about is, particularly for diverse populations, there are really important services and businesses that they can't get access to here, so they often end up having to travel on weekends or whatever.
Yeah.
Thoughts on how we can get more of that happening here so people don't have to leave for unique things?
Like what?
what?
What
Hair
are the
care
cer-
products, nails,
Yeah, certain-
that black community especially is just
Yeah, and then even
yeah.
within like the Indian population,
Yep.
there are multiple different, types of mosques and different,
Yeah.
And we don't have all of them represented.
Yeah, I think that does come with critical mass, and that's been a real challenge. Like I said, it's especially the African American population. The black population here is 2% maybe, and there's a critical mass thing that needs to happen before the demand for those services reaches, I think, a level that sustains, any kind of enterprise. I know that a lot of people are talking about it, though. I do know that this is not something that's being ignored. I mean, it's definitely being talked about because. Yeah, it's an issue. It's a big issue because you just don't have that like you do in Atlanta or KC or Dallas.
Well,
I mean,
what
it's
would
like-
critical
not a
mass
good
equal
answer.
in the Northwest Arkansas metro right now?
We're a long way from that critical mass, I think.
The Hispanic
and-
community has it, right? They're like 14% or so of the population now. But
We have a lot of amenities in this region that we wouldn't have for a region our size because the philanthropic community just bought the amenity
Mhm.
and gave it to us.
Yeah.
So that's really the avenue for
Yeah,
getting
that's
those
huge.
types of things.
Yeah.
Not the market's never going to provide it. That's just
So you're saying, for example, critical mass would be double-digit percent maybe?
no. I mean,
Or-
probably doubling our population would take us to critical mass.
yeah,
but
maybe
that's a long way away.
it is. And
We're growing 12,000 people a year right now, so it's not going to happen
Yeah,
in the next 10 years.
yeah.
With regard to that growth, so, I come from a real estate investment and development background, and I came here in '08 in a partnership with the FDIC when Arkansas National Bank failed. So my introduction to Northwest Arkansas was seeing kind of the disaster. And so now I'm on the other side where, we're building and buying commercial real estate. But a lot of my peers and I sit and have discussions, over beers or just on how long is this growth going to sustain. And so one school of thought is we're in a cycle. Demand is super high. There's a shortage of housing. There's, my wife owns a residential real estate, and $180 a foot used to be kind of normal. Now a normal home on the other side of the road, $250, $300 a foot we're seeing now for just 1990s built home. So how long do you think, one school is this is a cycle, it's not sustainable, we're gonna see a downturn at some point. How bad will it be? Will it be like '08? Probably not, but And the other side says, well, wait, this is like Austin 15, 20 years ago. We're just beginning the upslope. It's only gonna get more. And I know that's probably the basis of this entire discussion, but what is your thoughts on natural cyclical, changes to a market versus trajectory of where we're at here as a little region?
I think nationally, metropolitan areas are growing. They've grown for the last 30 years, and people are moving from rural areas to metropolitan areas, so I don't see that changing anytime soon. So in Arkansas, there are literally only two places growing. It's Northwest Arkansas and Jonesboro. The order of magnitude of growth between them and us is huge. They're much smaller than we are. They're growing at the same rate that we are, but for them to catch up is going to be a long time. So when people move within Arkansas, I think 45% of people coming to Northwest Arkansas come from the other 73 counties in Arkansas. So, people are leaving other parts of the state and moving to a big metropolitan area like this. So I think that's going to be the future of metropolitan areas. The difference, I think, for us is that even Jonesboro is lucky that Jonesboro is the big dog in the Jonesboro metropolitan area. We don't have a big dog, and that's part of our problem. Maybe opportunity, challenge, I don't know, but we're four big cities, not trying to diss Silent Springs or anything, but they're four big cities, and we're not always on the same page, and we kind of compete with each other in terms of growth. So that's an issue where we don't have a center-based growth. We're kind of drawn out as it is.
We're all growing.
I think with any cycle, there's a correction.
I think there's a correction coming.
needed. I don't know what it is.
Nothing
Maybe,
like 08.
Yeah.
We don't have the
agree with
inventory.
that. I mean, we're not in a dire situation.
We just don't have.
There are no empty homes.
Yeah, we don't have any inventory.
There are no empty
But
homes.
population growth and job growth is going to continue to drive. Do you think this 2.5% year over year is reasonable in the next, say, 10-year run, or?
I mean, it happened in the 90s, and people said, well, it probably won't happen in the 2000s. Then it happened in the 2000s, and then the whole crash happened. They're like, well, that's not happening. And then it happened again starting in 2014. So,
so we were driving it then. Now it's out of our hands is the difference. When you start making lists that put you down in top 10 numbers, that's not our decision about growth anymore. That's not us trying to go out and attract people, or Walmart growing a job sector, or JB Hunt expand. This train. I mean, there's no conductor, and so I think our projections may be low.
I think the growth that we've seen this past decade from 2014 on was not driven by any one employer or sector.
Right.
It was just everything was growing at the time. So
I'd like to jump on that thought for a moment. Oh, go ahead.
Do you think that will be affected by the lack of affordable housing? Because if you can't get people to move here and have a workforce available for companies to come, and plus they won't want to come if there's not a workforce available. So that's going to have some type of effect.
I think it will affect jobs for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will affect the housing, because again, like we said, the housing, talking about on autopilot right now, the housing is on autopilot. The multifamily developers are developing here. Now, who can afford it? There are people to afford that, but it's maybe not the jobs and the employees that are needed to make the market go.
It's not worker housing.
It's not workforce housing. So I think the initial most important impact would be jobs.
well, so go ahead.
I think one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up, which with an hour and a half, this is a topic that we could never cover all the avenues. But one of the avenues that usually gets left out of the conversation is accessible and affordable child care options.
Mm-hmm.
And people that are generally my age, we have, me and my wife have 2 children, and we pay $2,000 a month for child care.
That's crazy.
So, and I recently did a micro study that shows that in Fayetteville, to have 3 children, you're using 60% of the median income if you're going to have both parents working to have that all 3 of those children in child care. You also have the pandemic, which removed babysitters from the equation. So it gets left out of the conversation. But how does that impact the economy whenever you have a large sector of really a lot of the individuals that put back into the economy, I can't go on a Thursday night to a venue over here because of the cost of childcare is either astronomical or even not available.
Yeah. I thought the U of A was expensive. You should just enroll them there. It's cheaper. Seriously.
Don't give him any.
I don't have an answer for childcare. We hear it. You know, it's not. You know, and everybody always looks to the council to take stuff on, and you know that's not any ground that we've broken yet. But I know it's an issue, and you know I don't have a good answer for you on that. I just know it's an issue, and it certainly stifles our female labor participation rate. I hadn't looked at that number in a while, but yeah.
It's interesting to see what happens now after remote work, right? Because
Yeah.
I do think that there will be people who have found solutions differently through this time that they may not have found otherwise. I don't know what will happen, but I can see, you know, people saying, I gotta work from home because I'm keeping
Because
the
of
kids.
my kids, yeah.
Or something.
That'd be a good question for the governor. He's got $1 billion to play with now.
Right, yeah.
Not sure if you talked to me.
Well, Chris, not to turn this into childcare, but from experience from someone in the family that's owned a daycare, and not to say that these regulations are not necessary, but the number of sinks, bathrooms, and the ratios of students to, believe it or not, a full daycare, that operator's still not penciling very well. And that's $250 a week per child daycare. So I think how do you solve for that? I don't know, but it's not necessarily that these childcare workers are getting rich. I think that's again another one of the, is regulation too much? Is it too little? I don't know, but it's hard business to be in, even when full.
Amber, can I come back to you in a second? I just want to pick up on a theme that kind of emerged there for a minute. Mervyn, so much of our top line growth estimates are based on straight lining, projections of historic growth numbers. Something was mentioned just a minute ago that we have fairly recently seen the emergence of growth outside of the major employers. And so for so long, decades, Northwest Arkansas growth was driven by J.B. Hunt, Tyson, Walmart, Simmons, and some of the others. But now we're starting to see a more diverse economy. And there's a sense, I think, that what we're seeing right now is we're at an inflection point in our evolution as an area between being a big town and being a small city.
Yeah.
And that one characteristic of a small city, I mean, if you drive through Charlotte, there's hundreds of companies. There's general headquarters everywhere. They're not so dependent on a few major employers. We're starting to be in single digit most desirable place list very consistently. We're about to reportedly make our way into the top 100 desirable locations for a corporate general headquarters to be located. We recently have seen a huge spike in general aviation, corporate aviation users at Rogers Airport that we've never seen before. So we've seen a big increase in landings at Rogers Airport in companies that haven't been here before. So I'm not sure why they're here. Do y'all have a sense that maybe the historical data, based on really the foundation of those major employers, that we're about to hit a whole different part of our growth curve that could make a downturn unlikely and could really obliterate some of the projections? Is that possible?
I think at some point the economy will slow, but I think it's not going to be the same financial crisis and housing crisis that we had before, just because we don't have homes sitting around for it to drive prices down. Now, on the other hand, I think people are somewhat overextending themselves in the housing market today because they look at the mortgage rate, it's at historic lows, and then every point gets you $100 off on your monthly mortgage payment, but then if you go out and buy $200,000 worth of extra house, not really extra house, extra cost, you're not really coming out ahead. But people they see the mortgage rate, they've gotten, $4,000 or $5,000 from the government in the last year, and they're like, well, I got this time, I got this money, I got this mortgage rate. They go out and bid well over asking. I think when we track real estate prices, this is the closest sale price has been to list price in our market, which is insane to me. But anecdotally, from people I know that are buying houses, that are offering well over asking and still losing a bid. So, is that house price going to sustain in 5 years if you reappraised? Probably not. But as long as they stuck.
Yeah.
But as long as they stayed in the house, it didn't really matter, right? I mean, it's only a problem if you're trying to resell in 5
I think
years.
any sort of correction will start with the interest rates, right? At some point, probably even this year, and they'll start to go back up.
They're not
That'll-
going anywhere.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as our growth projections,
New
I mean, like we
companies coming
hear,
to the area?
yeah, but like, I can't project
Yeah, it's impossible.
based on.
Yeah.
It's okay, well, corporate land. What does that mean? Actually, I don't know. It's like,
I'm hearing things, and I'm just getting back out into, wearing real pants again. And it's like after a year and a half talking to people face to face, and I had a couple just off the cuff conversations. We had our annual meeting yesterday with some real estate guys here, commercial real estate guys here. They said the industrial distribution market is insane. And they don't play in that market. Even these guys, he said, I'm getting 6-7 offers on buildings of all sizes. He said it's kind of like housing now, and so we've always been thin in terms of the inventory on industrial, but that's kind of stunned me. Same token, office property is still in demand here. If you think about remote work, the first thing I thought about was, oh my God, the office sector is going to suffer mightily from that. We haven't seen that. And basically Wes Rogers that's the barometer now, right? That is and they're blowing and going over there. They're leasing stuff like mad. And so I think one thing that's come out of this is some consolidation, and markets like ours have benefited from it. So I don't have a crystal ball. Obviously, I handle prospects. I work with the chamber here, and we do that, and we've had good bit of activity. But honestly, it's a struggle for us because we don't have a lot of product. You don't have the real estate for them, And I'm always also really shaking my head at the companies that come in and they might have this big project or whatever, and they're expecting all these incentives.
Yeah.
I mean,
we don't do that.
I had a consultant just rake me over the coals because none of our localities did incentives, and I was like, well, if you had people lined up at the door, what would you do? I'm not going to give you anything. Hell, they didn't give Walmart anything. They got a new road and all that stuff. But I said, they're spending money on infrastructure and schools and all these things because they're growing so fast. And so, good luck in Oklahoma. We're just not going to do that here, So I think it's going to continue. Long answer short there. I do. And I think the diversification is going to continue. I'm really interested to see if new leadership at the university really wraps their arms around the innovation ecosystem.
Yeah. And entrepreneurship, which is
potential down there, tech transfer, and that new research institute, and trying to really diversify through that channel, which would bring a lot more science, STEM jobs to there. Because if you look at this market, and he'll tell you his number, we have very small engineering number of engineering jobs here. They're just not. IT is our big STEM job, and health care, obviously, but we export engineers and scientists by the hundreds at that university every year, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be trying to keep some of those. So I would really love to see the university just really now try to step into
an example to underscore the fascination with industrial property and industrial assets right now. Bill Stripling just sold his building. He wasn't looking to sell his building, wasn't marketing that building. Those guys, Olivet International is a supplier to Walmart in about a dozen categories. They're in California. They've got an office here in Bentonville. They've got a plant in Springdale. Knocked on his door and said, what will you take for this building? You can stay here. We don't have an immediate use for it, but in about 5 years they will. And they're going to have, in about 2 or 3 years, they'll have about 500 or 600,000 square feet of industrial space. They've got something working in Fayetteville as well, and they're probably going to end up moving more and more in all of their operations to Northwest Arkansas.
They'll go to 1 million square feet.
Yeah, I mean, even bigger than that. So, I mean, anything you can get your hands on in industrial right now, you know, and I guess Bill was just like, we'll worry about that 3 to 5 years from now. But yes, we'll sell you this building for $14 million. But yeah, so I think that's just an example of one company who sees, yes, Northwest Arkansas from a distribution, a supply chain, logistics point. You know, had an example yesterday of Transplace. This is cementing Northwest Arkansas as a global logistics and supply chain hub.
It's huge.
So that was big, and all of it is a big international supply chain business. So they've got a presence here, but they want a bigger presence. Their CEO moved here from California 2 years ago, lives in Bentonville now. So companies like that,
And
seeing the value.
That's near and dear to my heart, because I really do feel like that, you know, those are jobs that people can go make a living wage in without having to have a college degree, you know, and even though we still have a strong manufacturing distribution base here, it's definitely shrunk from about a quarter, you know, 40 years ago, the economy down to about 5 or 6% now. What our kind of dream is, and this is, well, it tangentially has to do with Rogers, but we've run out of kind of industrial property around in the cities, and we would love to develop out by X&A, you know, multimodal, have a big commerce kind of park center out there. And I would love for the cities to get together and figure out how to do something out there like they did with the airport, and then kind of figure out how you divvy up the tax revenues from the growth. But yeah, that's going to be a challenge here. And I know it definitely on land use planning. It's something that,
Well, right before this meeting, KPAC handed me this. Our department, Rogers, we have current 87 large-scale developments that we are working, 87, and 11 subdivisions. I mean, these are all projects that are in the works today. Amber, what do you have?
My question was just, because you mentioned that this area is most attractive to kind of like mid-age workers and people.
yeah, middle-aged people like Mervin. Yeah.
And people with.
Am I only going to live to 70?
So I was just wondering, like, what are the projections for the ability for people to come here and stay here and age in place?
Like retiree kind of
Mm-hmm,
generation,
with the lack
like
of
Paul.
transportation. Taking all the digs and going.
Like Paul's generation.
Bulletproof, I'm going to say.
With the lack of public transit, because the further, you
Yeah.
expand, the more it's necessary to have a car, and, you're pulling driver's license at 70, 80, 90 years old.
Yeah.
So you almost are saying, okay, after this workforce age, kind of gotta go.
You gotta die, or
Right.
like,
Unless
You're
you're
on
a
your
family,
Yeah.
which is, if you're anything like my family, this is our second time coming down here.
Yeah.
And it's because of Walmart, but our home bases are in Pittsburgh and Arkansas.
Yeah.
So if you are that Gen X person or older millennial who goes where the money is, you want to encourage people to stay, but how do you do that without the right kind of transportation?
Yeah,
here?
I wonder if we're not going to see a bigger influx of grandparents because of the mid-career professionals and family formation coming in. They're like, oh, I really like this area. There's a lot, we see that anecdotally. I don't know if it's going to play out in numbers. And also naturally the boomers are aging. And so they're going to kind of that bubble's going to start to increase a little bit now. But I hear you on transit's kind of like childcare. I think transit's in a little bit better place than childcare here. But I mean, there's big cities that haven't figured out transit yet. We had, Ted Abernathy does Arkansas. He lives in the Research Triangle. He said, we still haven't figured it out. And Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and we're 2 million people. And so he said, he would shake his head every time we'd bring up transit as a part of our strategy, because he's like, you just don't have the mass. You don't have the critical mass or the density to do public transit here in a big successful way. So you can do this in the cities. You can look at alternative point to point stuff, van, Uber, all that kind of stuff. But he said, I just don't ever see you guys getting to where you think you can be without obviously somebody stroking a big check and subsidizing it like they would child care or some of these other services we were talking about. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on transit?
I feel like it's one of those like chicken and egg problems. It's like if you never plan for it, it never happens.
Yeah.
Like you keep growing out. But, you know, one of the things with housing affordability, and it's like you guys are hiring for a regional housing
person,
something.
yeah.
And that was, 2 years ago, which a lot of this initiative came from a housing plan that was developed 2 years ago for the entire region. And one of the first item on that housing plan is develop a regional housing compact and plan. And I think it's fairly obvious when we looked at that study as if we were to do this, where would we do it? It would be along the old 71B. That corridor connects the 4 big cities. It has quite a bit of land available that's both public and private that could be developed for housing. And, there, as far as getting housing affordability and transit-oriented housing, that would be a great corridor instead of trying to do it on 49. You would do it along 71B. I think Ozark Regional Transit actually has a bus rapid transit plan
BRT line
that runs along 71B and does downtown Fayetteville to downtown Bentonville through Springdale and Rogers in an hour. So there are pieces of different plans out there. All our cities and county governments sit on quite a bit of public property in all these downtowns that is largely just parking lots, which again sits empty 95% of the time in any given city. So, the straight market housing is never going to be completely affordable workforce housing for people that work in the entertainment districts. That's something that cities and counties can do with public-private partnerships. Say, we're giving you the land, you're going to give us housing at this price. And it's going to be along the transit corridor, so that gets you your mass for density to make that line work. And I think it's the same thing, like you drive straight down the street, everything was built with the parking lot in front, business in the back, and I just came in this way. Most of those parking lots are empty. They've never been full.
Yeah.
We don't need those to be parking lots anymore. They should be housing. So there's land available. And one of the things, you said, okay, well, the remaining land in downtown, the reason it doesn't get picked up for housing development is because it's expensive. That's because it's a limited quantity. Tomorrow, if all 4 cities developed a regional compact and rezoned all of 71B to be mixed use that allowed housing, all of a sudden there's so much more land available, and it pushes that price down significantly. And we can't deal with construction prices, but we can deal with land prices. But I think that's, eventually when you guys hire this person, this is what this person should do, is get a straight plan down 71B.
Talk to Rob and Nelson, they're the ones.
Get all the cities to coordinate on it at the same time. So
it makes sense.
Good luck with your city.
Well, Garner Stoll, when he was still in Fayetteville, he was advocating for a very similar kind of an approach to this. It's interesting.
I might have whispered in his ear.
The idea of redevelopment and infill along these, so part of our comprehensive growth map was designed to prevent the kind of linear sprawl that we see on 71B and Walnut, primarily in Rogers, from occurring on every major road. So we build a big road. We need more capacity for cars, so we widen a road, and then that road develops commercially with linear sprawl, and now the road doesn't work very well because of the left turn conflicts, and so you do it again. You just do it again.
All the
you do it again.
stoplights.
And so we have done our best to halt commercial development along those linear ways, and then to encourage multifamily infill at these nodes. But we have had a lot of conversations in staff about expanding that opportunity for multifamily development along those linear sprawl lines, basically 71B and Walnut. That's an interesting idea because it also supports the existing businesses, which helps to prevent blight in those areas, and it's also along the transit line, so it ends up being a naturally transit-oriented development pattern.
Yeah, if I had the Northwest Arkansas Mall, I'd put housing in there.
Mm-hmm.
They were given the opportunity once.
Yeah, I was talking about
passed
that.
on that.
We came in, I was
Yeah, I just wondered.
Yeah, I spoke with Jeff last week for a story. I mean, he's been there for 30 years now.
Is
And
that right?
we're talking about what's the next evolution of the mall, you think, like, the first thing you mentioned was the parking lot.
Oh
And
my
the
God.
parking lot is just
Yeah, mixed-use
so
housing.
expansive. I mean, you can put any number of things
Oh my
on there.
God. Services, and that'd
Yeah.
be great for public transit stops. And
That's the same thing here with Frisco Station.
Frisco
Frisco
You
Station
have
is one that
all
we've
of
looked
the
at.
same
Yeah.
Yeah.
issues, and it's all of our it's all of our commercial thoroughfares. We have, all of them are strip malls with a huge parking lot in the front, and no one's going to the business
Yep.
anymore. You
Scottsdale
get
Center.
people to
in-
live there.
At 41 and Walnut went into bankruptcy and now it's been purchased, but low occupancy rate for commercial occupants at that center, and another area where residential infill could help that survive.
Sure.
And then it hadn't yet happened yet, but Pleasant Grove and I-49. I mean, the pattern is all there. It's great big
Yeah.
single-use big box stores with acres of asphalt around them.
Well,
And
those
some-
national stores, and if they haven't already, I mean, they're right-sizing their footprint all over the country. I mean, if they were operating in 20,000 feet, for example, if they're still operating at all, they're operating now in 8,000 feet. And so there's, that extra 12,000 square feet of, what to do with that space. And it's kind of like those malls are coming full circle. I mean, malls in the 80s and 70s around here were the local and regional retailers, and then the national retailers came in as the area grew, and now as those retailers are kind of right-sizing their footprint, there's more opportunity for A, either local and regional retailers, or B, just to do something different with them altogether, housing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Question. So, and this is kind of what you guys have, I think, been talking about, hitting on, but with land values and with the population growth that we're having just at an exponential rate, and increasing or continuing to increase our quality of life here, from a public policy standpoint, what kind of ideas do you have that we could implement to help with those things? I mean, obviously, like with Frisco Mall, you just kind of have to let the market take over from there. But as far as public policy, what are things ideas you guys have?
I think he just actually
Get the four cities together to rezone 71B all at the same time.
This
So
is-
it's not done out of sync right now. I mean, I think Fayetteville's doing it for a small section.
They are. Fayetteville's kind of
for a
starting that
very
up.
small section of it, but it hasn't happened for all of it. I mean, like, if you do all of it at once, it suddenly provides a ton of land for development. But I think, if I know how the market works, you should push that price down significantly and gets people thinking about all those parking lots. The other thing, I guess, is we do need to look at childcare regulation to some extent. Fayetteville removed the what did they remove? I guess
The
people
conditional
can
use
do
permit
conditional use
requirement to
permits
do childcare as a
childcare.
home occupation activity.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And I think
I have a
the
dog,
other
I
side
don't
of
know
that
anything
is
about
that,
this.
I think bigger employers are starting to provide their own, or thinking about providing their own on-site childcare. That's important. I'm not sure where all the childcare is based right now, but it tends to be a lot closer to where people live as opposed to where they work, and it should be the other way around. It should be closer to where people work, so that if parents need to visit their children during the lunch break or all those things, it makes pick up and drop off so much easier than if they have
Absolutely.
to rush back to
cost of
where they
transportation.
live
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
handles all that. So
that makes sense.
that's the other thing. And then at some point, I don't know what's in the latest markup of the big budget bill, but there was some talk about additional 2 years of childcare being provided federally. So and that should someone else's money. It's
I think a lot of we're waiting on a lot of details from Little Rock and DC these days.
It's hard to divvy up like $6 trillion or whatever.
It's crazy. It's crazy, and we've had a couple people ask us, "Are y'all going to kind of like convene a group of from people around the region, the cities and stuff like that, so they can just sit down around the table and better understand, who's got what and how much is coming down the pike and what it might be used for, and so on."
I mean, I think the cities have
Nelson's
money, but
have
the
it.
counties have got
Counties
money.
have got
And
money,
so that's
yeah.
really where I think we need to think about, if we're developing these region-wide plans, whether it's housing or transit. It's like we need to all sit down and say, it's like, all right, you got like 54 million here and another 54 million there. That's a lot of money. We can
The
develop a
problem
plan.
is the county governments are not, it
Governments,
doesn't
yeah.
behoove them
Yeah.
to come into a metro setting like that and expense resources. They've got, folks out in the county that live on dirt roads and
Yeah.
are screaming in their
That
ears all
pays.
the time.
Yeah.
So it's just, and in the nature of partisan politics in county government also greatly clouds the conversation of being reasonable and being a sober adult at the table
Yeah.
to do something really meaningful with the money. So I know at Benton County, that's going
No, I
to
think
No,
that's
I
the
think
issue in
Washington
Washington
County,
County
yeah,
too, but at the end
they
of the
just don't
day,
like each
most
other.
of the county JPs represent city populations, not
Correct.
rural, so,
Correct.
They're
Get them
like,
that
Like-
way, and I think that's great.
At the end of the day, they're elected by city dwellers,
Yeah.
not by.
You're absolutely right.
Are there any, to expand on Carrie's point, I mean, the unintended consequence of the Bentonville growth is, like, you can't afford to live in downtown Bentonville anymore. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like $2 million to buy a house near the square.
Yeah.
But is there any tools that the city could use that are incentive rather than mandating affordable housing? I mean, we've seen examples in other cities where they require new developments, a certain percent have to be affordable based on AGIs, but is there anything aside from, that seems to me like antiquated, is there anything else that, any tools that you're all aware of, or that we can maybe study?
I think using the city-owned parking lots and county-owned parking lots is where you're not mandating a private development to do something. You're saying, I'm giving you this land for nothing. You're going to give me a certain kind of housing, which there are entire
Should be
slews
able
of,
to,
I think Bentonville just got a arts developer
Yeah.
with the same
Art
type
space.
of, but that was philanthropic support, but with the same type of condition. It's like you're building housing at this price. There are people that develop this that, again, since you're giving them the land for little to nothing,
Did
they
you-
can then suddenly give you.
Did you get opportunity zone status down here?
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know much about OZ. but-
Limited.
Yeah.
Can.
You've
The
taken
art space deal, they'll be leasing that land, actually.
Yeah, it's about the only way you can do it in Arkansas is through a lease. You can't donate the land. You have to transfer land at appraised value or through an auction process by state law. So private-public partnership, which is typical to fill a pro forma gap for, affordable housing in most places, it can't be done in Arkansas.
Is that constitutional, or is that something we could get changed?
It's probably something you could get changed. but-
Yeah, I don't assume that's constitutional. I haven't driven it all the way back down into the
You can't
archives
sell it
of
for
the
$1?
basement,
Nope.
but
It's
But you
illegal.
can lease it, a
You
ground
can
lease
lease it,
for
you can do a ground lease
100
forever.
years.
The problem with the ground lease for 100 years with a lot of developers is that they need that asset to, in order to get the credit. So you're just digging you're making the gap in the capital stack wider in some cases by donating, by leasing the land at $1. It's a real challenge. And I think that as well, you guys will figure this out, I hope, but what you're left with is the need for loan guarantees and things like that from a very highly capitalized group that's going to guarantee, with stipulations, income to a developer to pay loans in exchange for affordability. Because the cities just can't participate very effectively in that.
When it comes to affordability metrics, housing and transportation being a helpful, useful tool for kind of getting at the truer cost. Are you aware of any indices or tools that are being developed or out there people are talking about that might be like a HTNC for housing, transportation, and childcare type index that kind of gets a bigger picture view at affordability and allows for better analysis and comparison? Maybe it's underway.
We subscribe to the C2ER cost of living survey, and that's all in there. That's something that obviously we could provide. It's very detailed information about us and every other metro in the country on that. I'm not sure how it would. you know, I don't know, maybe you could do comparisons of that
Yeah.
versus
like
median
dynamically,
income and all that
there's
kind of stuff.
folks are talking about, new tools or ways of looking at it
Yeah.
or what it might be.
To go bludgeon people on policy with it, just say, look, this is our income and this is our HTI, what are yours, index, new index that Mervin invented. Yeah, well, we could look at that. Follow, I don't know if you have my email, just send me an email and I can send you that survey. So you can see I'll send you the full thing, you'll see, it's very detailed.
All righty. Any closing remarks?
Well, I'm sorry we couldn't answer most of your, I couldn't answer most of your questions today. It was just this is not exactly the area that I work in, but hopefully it was a good discussion.
Yeah, very good discussion.
They were much better than me, but.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, everybody.